Welcome back to Steen Family Outdoors. This week we are out in Wyoming. We're on our annual hunting trip. This has been a trip that I've been going on for the last 6 years in the state of Wyoming, and we've been really fortunate to hunt mule deer, antelope, and elk. And we've had a lot of success over those last 6 years. So I thought I'd take some time out to talk about a really important decision that a lot of hunters face when they're looking at doing a Western hunt, and that's optics choice and what to take out when it comes to binoculars, spotting scopes. There's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of products out there to look at, so I'm going to break down what I use, why I use it, and how you can make a decision for yourself when you're looking at your next Western hunting trip. When talking about an optics system, I think it's important to start off with maybe the most essential core piece of optics, and that's a good set of binoculars. Some folks will use a set of 8 power binoculars to 10 power binoculars for that core piece. I really like the set of 10x42s, especially when it comes to Western hunting. These, and I'll get a close-up shot too, these are the Swarovski EL Range binoculars. These are the new ones with the tracking assistant as well. They call them TA. I have been a huge fan of these binoculars. I had a chance to use a friend's last year when we were on our hunting trip and fell in love with them. I also like the orange color quite a bit. There's a lot of times out west when you might need to set something down, you get in the hunt, and having a set of orange binoculars makes it really easy to find when you do set them down. But the reason that this 10 power binoculars, or maybe your core binoculars, are so important is that they always ride on a chest harness, right? You've always got them at your chest. They're your primary piece of glassing equipment. So if I was going to tell you as a set of advice on where to put and start investing in optics, I'd start with a good set of 10 power binoculars. I'm from Iowa, spend most of my time hunting in Iowa. So a set of 10 power binoculars I can use from archery season and gun seasons in Iowa. And then they're also a core set of optics that I use out west. So why did I choose these binoculars? First off, they are a high-end piece of equipment. The EL ranges from Swarovski are about as high-end as it gets. I really like that integration of the rangefinder with my primary binoculars, especially when it comes to rifle hunting. Typically the rifle shots that we've taken are in the 200 to 300 yard range is typically where we can close the distance at. And oftentimes it's just glassing deer, getting that range and trying to close the distance to one more spot. So when I can raise up the binoculars, glass an animal, and make that decision all in one go, and I'm not using 2 devices, it is really convenient. Now, I'll say that if you are an archery hunter primarily and you're coming out west, I do like to decouple those. I was really fortunate this week. A few days ago, I took a pronghorn. This is early September, the first time I've actually used a bow coming out west, and was able to take a pronghorn with my bow. And that ability with one hand to pull up range quick is really important. And even in tree stand hunting back in Iowa, I do like to have the standalone rangefinder as well. So you might find that that's some differences that you've come to appreciate as well. If you can try a set of range-finding binoculars though, I do highly recommend it. Core piece of binoculars are those 10 power binoculars, and I'm using the Swarovski EL ranges. The next set of optics that I'm a huge fan of are 15 power binoculars. So these are 15 power Leupold BX-5 15 by 56 binoculars. This is a big set of glass. They're very hard to handle when you're not on a tripod, and I'm going to get into stabilization in this video as well. We're starting off with the optics. I'll get into how we keep them stable and have a good viewing experience. But there is something about big open country. We're in Wyoming. There's a lot of times that we can look a mile plus, and being able to have a set of 15 power binoculars to view those long distances is really helpful. I find myself reaching for these quite a bit to scan and also get a closer look at animals. So when I go through my progression, I'll use my 10 power binoculars to kind of scan big areas. It's really important, again, to have a high quality set, because we're not looking for, the deer typically aren't walking out in the sun. They're bedded in shade. They're in hard to see areas. So that contrast is really something you want to look for, is what can I see in those shadowed areas? And when you're looking far away, getting a bit more zoom and really picking apart those shadowed areas is something I'll progress to with the 15s. And I can field judge an animal pretty well with the 15 power binoculars as well. So some don't appreciate the 15 power binoculars. They are heavy. It's one more piece to carry. If you're doing a lot of truck hunting, you know, picking out animals from the road before making a decision, I really like the 15s in those scenarios. Or if you're packing in early, getting to a high spot where you want to view animals, I always bring in the 15s. They just do a great job of picking apart areas from a long distance and give you that quick initial field judge. I won't leave home without a pair of 15 power binoculars, so they're the second as I go with the progression of 10 power binoculars as my core. I like having a set of 15s when I'm in a dedicated glassing scenario, and then I have one more piece of optics to kind of round out the set, and I'll talk about that here next. So my last set, or last optics piece, is the spotting scope. This is a spotting scope from Swarovski. This is their STX, and it's a 65 millimeter objective. It goes from 25 to 60 power zoom. So a spotting scope, especially if you're an Eastern hunter. Coming from Iowa, I've never ran spotting scopes aggressively until the last 6 years of hard Western hunting, and it can be a really intimidating purchase. Spotting scope setups can be very expensive, and they have a very narrow use case. So what I find is that the spotting scope is my least used piece of glass. And I'd even call it, in a lot of cases, the least important for me. And I know that will ruffle some feathers and hopefully will generate some conversation too, because I'm also trying to continually learn how to best leverage optic systems, and I've been evolving along the way. What I use the spotting scope for is the last field judge. So if I'm out hunting, I've identified an animal with either my 10 power binoculars or the 15 power binoculars. If I'm not confident if it's a buck I want to pursue, the spotting scope comes out to give that last judgment. So if I'm looking at a mule deer, I want to see how deep are its forks, you know, how well does it sit up from a width standpoint, does it have a frame that I'm looking for? That's what you pull out the spotting scope for. There's a lot of times though you can tell pretty quick with the set of 10 power binoculars that it's a buck you want to pursue, that it's a mature deer, or the 15 power binoculars that's a deer you're going to get after. So oftentimes the spotting scope stays in the bag. Swarovski, so this is the STX version, and it actually comes apart. So it has the objective, or sorry, this is the eyepiece, and the objective is two separate components. So Swarovski makes a modular system where you can have a straight, an angled, or they call it the BTX, so the dual lens for the eyepiece. And then you can also get different objectives. So they have 65, 85, 95, and 115 millimeter objectives. So I get this together quick. So I use the straight objective. Oftentimes I just like the straight. It's easy to use. I can get a good visual. Again, if you are judging animals from a truck, this sits up very nice on a window mount to be able to view an animal in that situation. So I like the straight objective. If I was doing a lot of heavy long distance glassing in a field situation, I do like the angled as well. So this is always a challenge in spotting scope, straight versus angled, dual eye versus single, what size objective. There's a lot of decisions to make, and they're really expensive. I mean, both of these components are four-figure purchases to get into. So you start to really think, what's the right thing for me? I have used in the past the 95 millimeter objective. I started with the 65 when I first bought this setup with the straight eyepiece. I traded off the 65 millimeter lens, purchased the 95 millimeter lens, and this year I went back to the 65. For me, I just didn't see a marked improvement with a 95 millimeter objective. It does give a higher zoom range, but when you're hunting in the early fall, a lot of times you do start to get some heat mirage that comes in on those really long zoom ins. So I just didn't get the benefit, and I'm very rarely needing low light capabilities for how we hunt to field judge an animal. I have my binoculars that I have good low light capability. They have good objective sizes. I just didn't see a big difference between the two, and that's me personally. If you do hunt a lot of early mornings, trying to glass and field judge, and I'm going to use field judge because I can still pick out animals with the 15s and 10 power binoculars. For me, the spotting scope only comes in a field judge scenario. So I didn't have the personal need for it and really didn't have the value for me. So this year what I did is I actually traded off the 95 and bought the 65 again, and I took the extra money from the 95, and I upgraded my binoculars to the Swarovski EL ranges that I talked about earlier. So that was how I've been trying to balance out this system, and I really like the 10, 15, and spotting scope setup. I always have my 10s on me. Sometimes I'll use the 15s, and I would say I rarely use a spotting scope, but a spotting scope is a tool that when you need it, it's sure nice to have a high quality spotting scope. Something I like about all of the optics I've talked about here today is they have great eye relief. I wear glasses, so not having to have the challenge of slow eye relief is a big win for me in how I'm trying to glass and look for animals. So you can move the eye cups out on all of these, but if you're our glasses wearer, these are glasses wearer approved. They've worked for me fantastic. So I've spent quite a bit of time talking about the optics. I'm going to transition into the stabilization component of this. So I had to move the camera around because I was using the tripod setup to film the video itself. So this is the tripod setup that I use. It's just a carbon fiber tripod, and I will get the brand name. This is a Promaster XC 525C. On the tripod, I'm using the Outdoorsmans mounts. So the fluid head and setup, it's another thing I've been a fan of, and I'm going to do my best to keep things stable here. But when I use this setup on my spotting scope, I have an Outdoorsman adapter connected in, and I can slide that in to the mount, and when I tighten it, I can get a quick attachment with that fluid head setup on my tripod. I can also remove the fluid head, and that attaches really easily to the window mount from Outdoorsman. Now we are set up with the Outdoorsman binocular setup. So you can see the through hole on the binocular adapter that sits right in to the same Outdoorsman mount. And on the binocular itself, there is a stud on those. Those are my 15 by 56 binoculars. There's the stud adapter, and I can't do this with one hand, but when that goes over, this slides. Actually, maybe I can do it with one hand. Yep, there we go. Slides directly in. You just simply tighten down the screw, and now you have your binoculars set up on a tripod. So when you're running 15 by 56 binoculars, it is almost impossible to handhold those. You get such a better viewing experience when you have that stabilization. And I can do the same thing with my 10 power binoculars as well. All right, so here's the close-up again on my EL Range binoculars from Swarovski. I love the orange pattern. I think they look awesome, and they're super easy to find. They're showing up a little more yellowish orange, but they're definitely a nice blaze orange when we're out of the sun. The stud is right here. You actually ship the binoculars to Outdoorsmans, and they press fit that stud in. It does not void your warranty on your Swarovskis either. They do a nice job of setting that up. So on these, the practice is the same. We go around the front. That stud would go in. All right, so I wasn't able to one-hand it, but when we tighten that screw back down now, I can have my 10 power binoculars also mounted up to the tripod for really easy viewing. And when you're trying to get ranges at really long distances, keeping stable is paramount. So that wraps up the stabilization. Tripod, I won't show you the window mount. It just pressure fits onto a window, pretty standard stuff. And that fluid head attaches with the screw right there onto the Outdoorsman adapter on your tripod screw, and then you are set up and ready to hunt. So that's going to wrap up our optics overview. I hope you liked what you've seen today. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. We're having a great time out in Wyoming hunting. This is the archery season side of it. Another friend's out chasing an elk this week, so hopefully he has some luck there. We'll be out here again for rifle season with mule deer and antelope tags, and potentially an elk if we don't get it filled here in the next few days. So thanks for watching, and until next time, get out there and enjoy the outdoors.